What's going on, guys? Chinese guy here. In today's video, I want to go over some of the changes done in the latest CTE patch, which allows players to play a version of the Final Stand DLC but on beta, so we can test out some features and just iron out this DLC before it releases relatively pretty soon. Also, a few weeks ago, there were another testing session for this DLC, but it was in early alpha and now it is in beta. There has just been a lot of changes done to some of the gadgets and weapons in this DLC. So in this video, I'm just going to go over some of the details and give you guys my thoughts and opinions of these changes, and just tell you guys if I would agree with these changes or would I think they need to redo them before the DLC launches for the public. Anyways, let's start first by talking about the Rorsch X1, which is the railgun and how it has been slightly nerfed. So this thing will no longer be one-shotting air vehicles out of the sky, which is a really annoying thing in the alpha, and I'm just very glad that DICE has tweaked this. They also made it that the explosion coming out from the round will no longer damage vehicles, so it must be a direct hit if you are trying to shoot at a tank or something. And lastly, they did reduce the radius of the one-shot kills on soldiers while increasing the radius of the non-lethal damage. Now, I think this was also a nice idea by DICE because sometimes I felt like this thing can kill more than 2 people at once for 1 bullet because of the big splash damage it does. So in a way, I would say this railgun would act a little bit more similar to the other battle pickups, which will do one-shot kills at range like the M82 and the AMR2. Overall, I just think everything is pretty much fixed for this battle pickup and it works pretty well, and it isn't extremely overpowered nor underpowered, and since it is a battle pickup, it must be better than other weapons in the game. Anyways, moving on, let's talk about the hover tanks and how they're still, in my opinion, a little bit wonky. Now, what I mean by that is, since they have improved on their recoil animations and controls and the camera position, the aiming with them are still pretty difficult in my opinion. I just feel like lining up your target with your crosshairs feels sometimes too slow, but then if you move way too fast, you will always overshoot your aiming. So I don't know if they designed it this way or they try to make this tank specifically for close quarters only. Anyways, if you are in a close quarters battle with this tank, you always have the upper advantage because you have such high mobility, and usually I kind of just drift around my target and try to shoot them in the back, which is where their vehicle is the most weak. But I still have the question always in the back of my head, wondering, could this be as good as the hover tank's controls are going to get? So hopefully DICE can continue to improve them in the coming weeks, because right now, again, in my opinion, I just feel like they're not as good as they can be. Moving on from some bad news, and let's talk about some pod launchers and how they're awesome to use and how awesome looking they are. In the pre-alpha of this DLC, the final art was not in these pod launchers, only the outside looked pretty nice, but now they added a HUD which adds a countdown timer to launch, kind of like the railgun. It beeps for 3 seconds or so and then you will be launched. Everything about it looks really futuristic, and I think it's an overall great job by DICE. One thing which DICE fixed in this beta is that the pod launchers in the alpha would explode on impact with the ground and the soldier would automatically die. But now once the pod hits the ground, the soldier is automatically ejected but still doing a little bit damage to you, but I think it's okay. It's not going to automatically kill you, so that's awesome. Lastly, these pods will automatically fire after a set timer, and it got kind of annoying in the alpha where players would just sit in them to protect themselves from their enemies. So I'm glad that DICE added this so people just don't hog them up and just sit in them. Next, let's talk about the XD1 Accipiter, which apparently properly sounds as scary as it is, but personally I don't think it is very scary, but I'll explain that a little bit later. But what DICE did is they added more feedback to the player when this thing is taking hits or it's low on battery. So you will see things on your screen like screen fuzz or blur, and you will hear beeping. Now personally, I don't think this battle pickup is scary because it is very weak. The minigun just does not kill at all. It is completely a pea shooter, and I would say this is probably very useless right now. I would definitely like to see a slight buff to this battle pickup. It just doesn't feel powerful enough, and I know you aren't putting yourself at risk when you use this thing because you can just hide somewhere, but since the battery life isn't that long, you kind of have to stay close within your body or else you will just be wasting it flying around. So I think a slight buff would definitely help this thing be used more. And lastly, let's talk about the DS-3 Decoy, which is basically a gadget for all classes, and when it is thrown down on the ground to be used, it will randomly ping locations on enemies' mini-maps to try to trick them of where you actually are. Now what they did compared to the alpha and the beta is that they have added a short delay before this thing is activated, so you have time to move away from it when you throw on the ground. And speaking of throwing it, you can actually throw it 50% farther than before. I personally think this gadget will be used quite often in the future when this DLC releases. I would say within the 2 days of playing this DLC, I have been already a victim of this gadget multiple times, and I say it's pretty good for trying to escape difficult situations or capturing objectives, making them think there are multiples of you, but in reality there's only one player and the decoy is just creating distraction. Anyways, that's about all the info I have for you guys in this video regarding the CTE on the Final Stand beta. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and down in the comments, tell me what you guys think about some of these changes. Do you want some things to be buffed or nerfed, or do you think like things like the railgun are just completely annoying and unnecessary? Hopefully you guys can get a chance to get on the CTE and play this DLC for yourselves, and in my opinion I would think this DLC would be released within a month or so. So hopefully all the players on all the platforms will get a chance to play this DLC and experience everything for themselves. Anyways, thanks for watching. Peace out guys.